this is a pleasure and honor being actually in this place, surely. This is going to be a long march for you too today with Vyborg Library, and I started with this. I couldn't resist taking this photo from Aalto because at Bio Sanatorium just in early 1930s, the photo has been taken by Gunnar Asplund. And while visiting there, and actually this is a postcard Asplund sent to Aino Aalto, telling that, well, tell Alvaro that I love him too. And that's how it is. Anyway, we are here on the lecture hall of Vyborg Library, and that's how it looked in 1935 when the building was finished, the kind of building was ready. And in fact, the competition started, and here once again, one of those early photos, which were kind of exhibited in international magazines. And as you can see, Aalto has been extremely strict how the building should be taken, photographed, and from which angles, etc. And that has been rather funny. And for instance, you can see that he didn't quite like the church, the late 19th century church behind the library, and that was removed from the photo anyway. So, like all the entries in 1937-38 for this Vyborg Library competition, they took some hints and ideas from Gunnar Asplund's works, and especially the library. And you can see that this winning entry had the same thing in the facades. And as you can see, the motto here by Aalto, this www, he has been ahead of his time. Anyway, it took some 7 years from the competition to the end to kind of finalize the building. And here you can see the second and the third stages from late 1920s, before the Great Recession came, and actually the design work was stopped for a couple of years, and then it started again in 1933, and only then. And here you can see both Aalto's, Aino and Alvar, and then young Arne Ervi, who was a site architect for the last 1.5 years for the library, and that's kind of the start for Ervi as well. He worked for Aalto's office, and they had a lifelong relationship together. And this is from the main entrance foyer of the library. And here you do have the lending department of the library. Once again, these same ideas you can see at the city library, all these empty walls, and then the book stacks on the lower parts. Well, here you have the Finnish books on the upper shelvings, and then the Swedish and foreign ones on the lower ones, and on that book ditch. And here's reading department of the library, and that's how it looked originally. And pay attention for these. Wait a minute. For those, Aalto invented a 2-leg tables, as you can see from those photos, that actually they were connected, and every single table had only 2 legs underneath, and that has been quite unique. Just saving those, so these 3-leg chairs were not the only ones Aalto made, and the lamps, actually they have those helmet kind of lamps they moved in Aalto's career in every single kind of library building, for instance, until 1970s to Mount Angel Library in States. Still you can see some kind of similar lamps like they did have in 1930s. And that's one thing in Aalto's ideas, that when he had certain designs like 1920s or 1930s, so you can kind of follow those paths through the whole career. And that's the lecture hall wing of the and office wing of the library. Actually, the library, and here we have actually very close to the same kind of image when you come in for this lending department as you have just entering the city library here in Stockholm. Well, what happened? The war happened then, and in 1940, Vyborg had to be evacuated, and the library was intact at that time, and so the Soviets immediately took the library and started to use it as such. And you can see the original chairs there on the reading department of the library, and naturally you can see Stalin there behind, watching and guarding everything here. And then after 1944, the building looked like this. So this is the lending, lecture hall wing. So actually parts of the walls had vanished, and you had leakages on the roof, and you could see it through the building, and there has been a lot to do for Soviets, and surely they thought, well, that was empty. The building was empty for 10 years, from 1945 until mid-1950s, and then they started to design, and in Leningrad and in Vyborg as well, what to do with the library. And this was one of those possibilities, how to kind of change and alter the whole library up to the kind of Stalinist architecture. Well, luckily that didn't happen. And those young architects who were involved at that time, they somehow could tell that the library should be restored as close to the original as possible. And here you have on the left-hand side, you have the original plan by Aalto, and then on the right-hand corner, you do have this 1958 design of the library. And you can see, for instance, from the entrance areas, all the wardrobes, they have been kind of taken off from the area, and the whole lecture hall has been converted. In fact, that was this is already improved version, because they were supposed to have a cinema inside that one, and kind of the use of that altered to the on the reverse way, how it normally worked. But anyway, that was then dropped off, and Mr. Sver, Alexander Sver, who was the architect of the restoration, he was a young fellow, and he insisted that the building should be kind of restored as close to the original as possible. And in fact, they asked their governing bodies that should they apply Alvar Aalto's office the plans, how it looked originally, and they were thinking of that, but naturally that was politically not possible, and that is why they could work with those with the building itself. And for instance, Alexander Sver told that they found this undulating ceiling model from all the paintings from the wall. So that was the way how they could kind of form that undulating ceiling. They didn't use pine, they used spruce, and they were not kind of straight ones, those wooden slabs. They were kind of with rounded corners and lacquered, and that was completely different than how it looked originally. But we'll come to that later on. And here we have one of these, even better, the plan. And in fact, when we are looking for this plan, it came quite obvious for us when doing the restoration and making all the studies and looking for books, etc., that we have to make a valuation between the original building and then all of those building parts which were built in late 1950s, 1960s. And then later on, you'll see those kind of samples. Anyway, this is how it looked. How it looked in early 1960s. And in fact, this photo has been taken, and a couple of these photos have been taken by the architect Alan Irvine, who visited the library in 1962, and the Alvarado Foundation got his photos then later on, and they were of a great help for us when doing these restoration works. And here we see the hall and the lending department, how it looked in 1962. And then once again, from the outside, the great glass wall, which was already in that second phase model of the library in 1927-28. And it kind of came through all of those processes, and this is how it looked in 1960s, and that's how it looked in 1991 when I visited the library for the first time. So that was kind of the starting point for the restoration for us. And here are some details how things looked at that time. Young architect Sergei Kravchenko started to study Aalto's library in St. Petersburg and Vyborg. He lived in Vyborg in late 1980s, and he studied. And then the Finnish Ministry of Environment, some fellows there, Jussi Rautsi and Mikko Mansikka, they took contact to Sergei Kravchenko, and then Sergei came to the Aalto's office while I was there as well, and he got information about and plans about how the building has been, etc. And then Sergei was one of the early birds to understand the value of the building, and he was fighting for the building and in Russia, and that wasn't an easy task at all in Soviet Union to do that. So when we started, actually that glass wall was the first restoration work we did in 1994 and 1995. Then at that time we had Estonian carpenters working for the project. That was possible for us to do it, and you could kind of enter from Estonia easily to Russia and back, and that is why at that time that was kind of a politically mild circumstances for us, and that was rather good. And then in Aalto's office we started to design all these some details, and a friend of mine, Sverker Gardberg, who worked for the office, started to look for possibilities on the right-hand side about, for instance, the glass wall, and about all the needs what the library had. For instance, they needed some extra spaces, more storage spaces, and then Sverker made designs to some additional annexes just around the corner or behind the library, etc. But they naturally were not executed at all. But anyway, in 1994 we started the works, and actually the details on the left-hand side, those are the ones we obeyed, and basically they are based on old photos, because the old drawings, those mechanic works drawings were this and that, so they were not too accurate, and Aalto's drawings were not accurate enough. But from the real photos we could find the ways and measures how things were done. And here we are on the process. As you can see, the process has been extremely nice. You can see the Estonian fellow, as he has been working in Soviet Union to find that sort of tools to work for the windows, etc. Surely we had all the archives to work with, Aalto's archives and all the others from the ministries, and which we could use when making the restoration work first in the Aalto's office, and then we had the restoration committee which took care of the restoration designs and everything. But actually, as we know that Aalto was very strict how things should be photographed, so there were lots of kind of dark angles, we couldn't know that how things were done. And that is why those 1941 documentary photos by Finnish military photographers. They were extremely important for us. So here you can see how it looked, how the lecture hall looked like. And for instance, Aalto never showed those lamps in his drawing because he didn't like that idea to have lamps on the under the undulating ceiling. Or then we have on the left-hand side children's library, and we had been wondering that how they did all those carpentry works there. And in fact, these some 10 or 12 photos from these military photographers, they were really precious for us in that work. The similar thing with those lending and reading department buildings, photos. How about those shelvings were executed? We did have the drawings, but we didn't have any other evidences of that, how they had been then installed, etc. But there we got lots of answers, and that was important for us all. Then the very next thing was actually the office wing roof and roof repair, because that was leaking terribly badly, and we had to do something for that. And that happened in early 1990s or mid 1990s as well. And here on the right hand side, Maija Kairamo looking the colleague and friend and our Secretary General for this committee of ours, looking for the slab, how all these Russian layers, which were laid on the top of the original layers, they have been taken out, and actually all the eaves were kind of raised with some 35 centimeters, and we had to push them back to the original kind of measures to have those portions in those cubic forms again back. And here you can see how the Soviets made all the constructions. For instance, here are some original structures behind, and then you have Soviet innovation. You have Styrox foam, and then you have concrete, and they mixed, and that's how they made kind of thermal insulation layers there. And then you had some 10 layers of bitumen on the top. Bitumen, and that's how it looked when we started to do those works. And here again, you had those UFOs on the roof, and they were then later tasks 30 years ago, those ones. Something is creeping here, but I don't know what is this, but nevertheless. And here's our colleague Leif Englund, who was working with us as well, working those. And many times people are just complaining that do they have any kind of skillful people, professionals doing the work there. And I could say that in Russia and Eastern Europe, maybe the thing is the motivation. Basically, if you motivate people and if they understand why things are done, then they can do whatever. And as we can see in those copper works, these are extremely nice. Some of those, well, surely were kind of, some thieves took some coppers, and then we had lots of stories in our newspapers, and everything is going to be stolen from the library. But actually, that was one and the only time they took in early 2000s how things were done. Anyway, here we have the lending department and the roof about a bit more than 20 years ago, and some details how it looked like. And with all of these ventilation shaft covers, etc., we followed the original details as carefully as that was possible for us. And then we come to the engineering part of the library, because that's extremely important in these, for instance, in the interiors. And here we have on the upper photo the crystal ceiling heating radiation sealing, which was used in a couple of buildings in Finland. For instance, Bio Sanatorium had kind of the earlier version for this, but surely there they used only metal plates underneath the heating pipes. But in the library, those 1-inch, 25 millimeter heating pipes, they're kind of hidden inside the 10 centimeter plasters, which were 10 or 11 centimeter plasters, which were just on these inner ceilings between and then on the other side of the skylights we had. And actually they had been there, and that is one of the big things and kind of innovations at the library, to have all those shelves down and the walls empty, and then you had radiation, the warm heat coming from the ceiling. And here's the whole system. This photo is for the French magazine AA, and here's actually the whole technical system, how it worked. So we had the radiation coming from the ceiling, and then you had the ventilation, the blown. There was only one machine which is blowing the air from the machinery room, and then it was blowing to the upper part of these massive brick walls, and then that was just going out just on that shelf level, and then it went to the ceiling, and that was how it worked originally. And Aalto said that, for instance, this lighting system was kind of eye hygienic for people, because they could get that light from the skylights, and that was good for the eye. So eye hygienic, that's how he used in his kind of words. And in fact, I will then later on put some books I have about the library, and then just telling about those stories as well for you to have a look. And then we have two plans here. The upper one just showing the electricity plan for the building. It's been rather simple at that time how the electricity had been designed for the library. And then on the lower one, you'll see the machinery room here, and then all these technical shafts we have underneath the building, and all these kind of heating pipes and everything. They were just routed via those ducts, and actually they still are. So we use those, we just cleaned them and used them again. And in fact, the whole technical system and the air system is working as in the same manner as it did in the original building. In 1960s, when the Soviet renovation was done, they could never kind of run the system. So actually they didn't have any ventilation from early 1960s until late 19 or until 2000s. So that was kind of, it had natural ventilation, but without no machinery at all. And here are actually you had the machinery rooms underneath in the cellar, and they were rather nasty and dark places when we started the works. So here's the structural engineer on the upper photo, and the manager who actually was a talent of many tasks. He was a coppersmith, and he was just taking care of these technicalities in the building, etc. And he was trained. He was a trained meteorologist by origin, but he changed his profession. Then we go to these technical matters, and here is the original building site and how the crystal heating system was installed. And in fact, when we decided, we tried first to use parts of this system, but when making those some Röntgen photography, then we decided that that's not possible to use those pipes anymore, but we have to renew those. Then we did have a big fight with the Russian partners, because they thought naturally that we should use new plastic or composite pipes, but that's one big thing of kind of restoring and about principles. So then later on we renewed the system with iron pipes, and that's how it looked originally. And this one is from the building site when those both original and then Soviet plasters. Soviets used very hard cement-based plasters in everything, walls, ceilings, etc., and outer walls as well, facades. And on the left-hand side, you can see those parts of Soviet plasters. And when you have those heavy plasters, cement plasters on the top of old Finnish lime plasters, then basically you have too much weight and all these plasters are coming down, and that's what happened to those ceiling plasters as well. Anyway, here's the building works and how, for instance, in walls we opened some shafts so that we could install new heating pipes to those shafts. And okay, here we have, and in fact they were our colleagues and professionals. They were very clever, making all kinds of tools to make those circles kind of work. For instance, you had an axle, and then they made kind of the wooden board in a way that you could use it around the cylinder and have it kind of round, and that's how it was done. And here we're just investigating some works which were done in with the heating system. And here on the right hand side you can see the way how these building works were done and which were the systems. Here just polishing and making the final grindings of those systems. Actually, I could say that when I climbed up to that kind of skeleton or that system, and that was weighing like 10 centimeters, you moved very carefully up there. And in fact, the whole library looked extremely interesting and spacious when we had all these claddings inside these halls and how it looked, and so something nice. And then we go to the famous lecture hall, because this is one maybe the most photographed space in the whole library, and how it looked in 1990s and then in early 2000s as well. But that's how it did, and here are some fellows actually who had been already there on the roof working there, and then once again making all these carpentry works inside the building. So actually that building company which we used for 10 years, they had some half a dozen guys who were making all of those phases, and then we had a good kind of respect for their work, and that's what is important. So you had a very nice and tight kind of connection with these, and they could ask right away that how could we do, is it okay if we do it like this, etc. And that's rewarding, extremely rewarding. So like in every single 1930s buildings I've seen and investigated, when the concrete has been casted, so the irons are in every single place, those are extremely close to the surface. And like here, when we know that the building was empty for more than 10 years, so many of those irons and beams, they were corroded, and we had to do lots of kind of restoration and preservation work for the irons and for the concretes as well, before doing all these new claddings to those and new skeletons for this undulating ceiling. And then we, for instance, understood and learned that we could make, because we made PDF to one-to-one scale about those undulating ceiling skeletons, those wooden parts, which were then kind of installed on place, and that PDF, the size of the drawing was 5 meters and 10 centimeters, and there we could have one whole kind of beam section made, and there we're just investigating those. And the panels, actually, we were looking for some maybe 6 places, 6 machinery works which were making wooden panels, and we tried to get it from the Finnish companies or these little kind of pine panels, and then we tried to have those from the Eastern Karelia, and finally those ones which came there, those are from Siberia. So you might say that these are from the Eastern Finland, but anyway, they are from Siberian pine, which is now there, and in a way funny. Aalto described that they were using Karelian red pine in those kind of pine, little panels. And actually, it's rather funny. I don't know, can you see quite well enough, but in this concrete structure, we had all the 6 millimeter irons ready, just showing us where the wooden beams have been, and so we could see and use the old original places for those supporting structures, and that's how that was basically done. And here we have the situation in early 1960s on the right hand side, and then we have the original one, and then the kind of almost finished the first part of the place of the undulating ceiling. And here again, just making the flooring in 1930s, and here making the flooring in early 2000 or 2009 actually, to be ready. And this one when we finished the work in 2010. And in 2010, we had the situation that all of the small works, which could be kind of managed to do and also to fund, because the funding is came from Finland, it came from Sweden, it came from all places from the Western world. And at that time, we were in the situation that we needed more money, because we had spent more than $1 million, but we needed more, some 6 million. And at that time, our former president, Mrs. Tarja Halonen, was in St. Petersburg and discussing with that time Prime Minister of Russia, Mr. Putin. And Halonen described that we have this common project in Vyborg. Putin didn't know that, but he said that, well, I'll find it out. And then it took some half a year before we heard in the autumn that the Ministry of Finance in Russia had already approved the application to get funding for the library. And then later on, just before Christmas in 2010, the library got 655 million rubles just to make the restoration to finish the whole thing, and that meant something like 6.4 million euros. And with that one, we could do it, but that was not for the Finnish kind of guidance, not for the Finnish design phase or anything. And in that place, Maija Kairamo's role was just marvel. He could kind of get money from the Finnish big companies, Ahlströms and Fortum and others, just to fund our design phase, etc. And for instance, between 2010 and 13, I visited the library some 45 times a year, so almost weekly. So that has been really stressing. And here are the main, then we go through some of the projects. Once again, here are the main doors, which were originally done in a way that you have steel frames, and then you have bronze panels and bronze profiles on the top of those kind of steel skeletons. And in fact, they were produced pretty much in the same way. So actually, we didn't have at that time anymore those ready-made bronze profiles for the doors, but we had to make those. So actually, they were welded in St. Petersburg. So those forms, and we could just then just kind of combine those on site for ready doors. And the same thing with some of those stairs. We had the concrete marble pavings here and staircases, and they were simply just restored with similar kind of concrete based materials. And here are some samples for those on the way. And the stairs up to the roof, they were in really poor condition. And here you can see the situation. We had only 2 stairs which were quite all right, and all the rest we had to do kind of replicate again. And then this is the way how it looked at the end. And once again, the corridor behind this the lecture hall, and how it looked. And it was quite funny to look for your photos of the library, the city library here, because some of those corridors and some ideas are kind of coming from Stockholm to Vyborg library. Even the form is something else than the classicist one. And here finishing some of the works, and once again these professionals were really good and skillful, and they wanted to do their best for the work. And here once again we see the situation that Aalto's work was a bit different, and then Mr. Swear made some alterations in 1960s and early 60s, and for instance they opened the counter for the reading department, and in fact they did it in such a good way that we wanted to keep that phase in the building. So we do have lots of those 1960s kind of solutions in the library still. So it's a combination with those 1930s, 1960s, and some additional 1990s, 2000 structures inside. And here, for instance, making these hangers for curtains, etc. So they were produced in St. Petersburg, and in such a way that we made kind of those black steel works. We just combined those and made installed those to the library, and then when they're fine-tuned, then they took them back to the building works, and then they got nickel coats, first the copper and then the nickel coat on the top of those, as they had in original structures. And here's some railings again. Once again, here's something you have to do some compromises. For instance, railing levels were in 75 centimeters, and we had to raise those with 5 centimeters to 80 centimeters, even though, for instance, in Finland, you have to have those railings up to 90 centimeters, but luckily we were not in Finland. So that's one thing, and it was quite funny when one of those building inspections from the Eastern Finland came in 2014 to the library, and he was totally pissed off because the Finnish regulations were not used on those kind of handrails or many other places in the building. So here you can see some of the details. And then we have some collection for the situation. The office corridor in 1935, and then we have in 1960s, actually, or between 60s and 90s, and then 2013 phase. All the materials we used, we tried to kind of use similar ones Aalto did. And at that time, luckily, the Aalto's office had some of those kind of material books, for instance, DLW, linoleums, and then Nokia rubber books, just showing, and we could see that what sort of materials were originally used. And therefore, for instance, the carpets are from DLW linoleums, and then we have French rubber sheets there on the kind of entrance level and the offices as well. So they were done at that way. With the plasters, now we used lime plasters, and then about materials, some materials we had to import from Finland, and there we had lots of difficulties with local customs, and that's one big thing. For instance, now all the paints which are on the walls of the reading department and lending department, those are namely linoleums, because we had to kind of export those from Finland as linoleums to the site. Otherwise, that wasn't possible at all. And here's the main entrance, and as you have maybe seen Bio Sanatorium light features and lighting features, those are extremely similar ones, and basically we borrowed one model from Bio, and then replicates were made in St. Petersburg of those lights. And actually in Bio they also made the lamp because of hygienic means, and that's although some of those parts were used in a couple of years later in Vyborg as well. There we come to the lending department and how it looked originally and in Soviet period, and basically how it looks now. And there's all of those handrails, they had to be, and all the materials had to be done, and veneer surfaces naturally had to be done again. And some of those lights which are between the skylights, they are partly original, partly from 1960s. And since kind of all those works were done those works were done once again in 1960s very well, they were just preserved and used like that. Soviets made lots of interior doors and welded those steel profiles more or less according to the original ones. And there we had a big kind of quarrel and maybe a fight with our colleagues, because once again they thought that all these Soviet designs and Soviet works from early 1960s, they are so clumsy, they are so awful, that we have just to replace those with kind of modern, smooth details which follow the original structure there. But once again, that's one big thing about sort of authenticity and the philosophy of kind of restoration works. And then finally these 1960s parts, because they were, well, they are presenting that era and they are there on place. We could save those. But then we had an idea to kind of safeguard and restore one Soviet wall part from another corridor, and just kind of restore all those alkydic paints from the Soviet period. And we decided with our kind of constructor that fine, that place will be intact, and we just preserve it very carefully. And then after 1 week I came back, that was gone. So if you win some battles, then somehow you lose another one. So it's kind of a game as well. And there we have similar thing. This is the one I spoke of, that we have kind of very close counter in the reading department, and then Soviets opened that counter and made it partly with wooden panels, and then that was the decision for us to restore that wooden panel version from early 1960s. And then once again, a photo from the main glass wall, how it looked like. And that's the northern kind of facade originally, and in 1980s, actually 1990s, those photos, and then 2014 winter. And there we have the main entrance, where in Soviet period they had the Finnish soapstones were removed. Original soapstones were removed, and then they were replaced with polished, dark, or almost black granites, and the whole looks was very, very different and dark and in a way dull, and that didn't fit to the building one bit. So we could kind of negotiate and buy new soapstones from the same quarry in eastern Finland, which kind of produced the original stones as well. These are from Juuka, from the eastern Finland, and in fact at that time in early 1990s, in 2000s, early 2010s, the kind of political climate was good for us and good for the restoration, so we could kind of get materials from Finland, from abroad, and paints and others too, and some electronic equipment and kind of switchboards, etc. They were exported at that time. But you know, many of those, or when you make the restoration, the work is a lot more than just the plain work, what it is. So for instance, here we have the situation on the left upper corner. This is a bit unclear, unfortunately, but Juha Leiviskä, the academic, is bringing those kind of oak panels to the flooring of the library. It happened in a way that for some reason it was just impossible to get any good oak material from Russia, so we had to export or bring them from Finland, and in a way the easiest path was just to have a bus, and then we had a journey, a visit to the library, and we had 40 people there, and then everyone could bring some 30 kilos of material, so actually we could bring half of those oak pieces to the floor just in that bus. And you can imagine the idea and kind of wondering of the eyes of the custom officer when he was opening those kind of doors underneath the bus and looking, what the hell is this? I said that, well, those are presents for the library. Presents! Yes, and now they're there. And then we had surely all sorts of parties, like here, when after finishing this office roof work, and all the workers, and some of those were skillful musicians, so we had rather nice time. And then on the left hand side, that was when we came there with Maija, that was quite obvious that something had happened, and they just the library people and library directors told that now they have a permission from the state to have funding for that restoration of work. So just celebrating that one. And surely sometimes you had to do something else, and just having some shashlik with our constructors on just nearby the Gulf of Finland on the dacha of this the manager of the company. So in a way, we became friends. And sometimes Tatiana Svetelnikova just told that, you know, Tapani, you are our eyes to the world. And it happened in a way that before our train was leaving, you may have had some 1 hour or whatever to have a coffee or a beer in a local nearby restaurant or bar and just speak about some other things than only this library and about techniques. But if you and when you do that, it makes a lot easier to work and to make and to get things done and things done properly and in good quality, and that is important. So in many ways those connections were good. Now I just have to say that I haven't been there since the COVID started, and then somehow I don't feel that it's wise to go there on these circumstances. I know a friend of ours just visited the library last summer, and things are very well there, which is very nice. And people are still devoted for the library and its maintenance, and that is important for us all. Okay, and here's Arne Ervi just having a little brush for the photographer of the for the kind of book which was produced in 1935 for the library, and here's the entrance today on the left hand side. So many thanks, and if you have any questions, I surely try to answer you, and let's discuss about philosophies, etc. And hope we have possibilities to visit there one day.